I would like to welcome you to our panel. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it to Bucharest. It would have been great being back to Bucharest, but it was a bit of a short notice. And so I will try to chair this panel online. We have 4 distinguished guests on the panel. 2 of them are in Bucharest, as far as I know, and 2 should be with us online. However, I couldn't see among the online participants yet Ms. Soraya Post. I hope that she will join us. But before, let me, I didn't express my gratitude or my thanks to the presentations to Iulian and Maria Dumitru during I posted my question previously. I would like to do it now. It was really very, very interesting and important. And I think in the discussion, Iulian gave us already input for the topic we are dealing now with on this panel. So the tools for fighting against historically rooted anti-Gypsyism, truth and reconciliation commissions in Romania and internationally. We should never forget anti-Gypsyism is not a phenomenon of the past. It's a phenomenon of our current times. And also moreover that the anti-Gypsyism in the past also influences or probably even determines the anti-Gypsyism today. And I think also Iulian pointed this out, not dealing with the past or not addressing anti-Gypsyism in the past is also a manifestation of anti-Gypsyism today. Since we talk now about the tools for fighting historically rooted anti-Gypsyism, we should keep in mind that we talk about past and present times. However, we also want to learn about tools available to fight against the historically rooted anti-Gypsyism. I still hope we have now all 4 guests on our panel. We have, on the one hand, first we have Mr. Iulian Paraschiv, the president of the National Agency for Roma in Romania, Mr. Giuliano Dumitru from the Aresel coalition. We should have hopefully now Ms. Soraya Post from Sweden, and Mr. Pedro Casermeiro, the CHACHIPEN expert from Spain. Mr. Paraschiv is, as I said, the director of the National Agency for Roma in Romania. The National Agency is coordinating the implementation, monitoring, and evaluation mechanism of the Roma strategy, and is also part of the working group on combating discrimination. And the Roma strategy in Romania has 2 relevant objectives. One is supporting research, preservation, promotion of Roma cultural heritage and Roma cultural identity, and combating anti-Roma discrimination, discourse and attitudes that generate hate speech or hate crimes. So the fight against anti-Gypsyism is an important part of the work of the National Agency. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Paraschiv and ask you if you could say a few words about the Roma national strategy and how the fight against anti-Gypsyism and the fight for reflecting Roma history are addressed within the strategy, and probably also what the government or the national agency is doing on the implementation of the strategy. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Many thanks to the organizers for having me, and I would like to congratulate Mr. Iulian Rostaș for this research, for this piece of research, which brings novelty, but also reconfirms some of the things we were already familiar with. On the one hand, the discussion should focus on what's currently happening in Romania in relation to these aspects we're discussing, but it should also focus on the European level because things are interconnected. Unfortunately, this is not only happening in Romania. I think that in all the European states, the Roma minority is the most unpopular minority. Starting from this, I'd like to differentiate clearly between the 2 dimensions, those that have already been discussed so far. Those in which we are discussing about the legal framework, so those institutions that have the capacity to sanction such behaviors and attitudes. So how does the Romanian state fight against such manifestations? We've seen some statistics. In my opinion, they are insufficiently relevant if we were to think about the reality of the anti-Roma phenomenon in Romania. So we do have the institutions, we do have the coercive tools on hand, but their effects at the level of the society are not so impactful. So it is useful to have such a direction, but in reality, it does not produce effects, because the beneficiaries and all those who should benefit from these tools do not know that there is a National Council for Combating Discrimination. They do not know that we have a law on anti-Gypsyism in Romania. Moreover, those who can resort to and those who suffer and feel the effects of these phenomena do not know that such a legal framework exists. Secondly, not even those who should put into practice, or those who should implement the sanctions do not know it exists. For instance, the police. Few people know about the existence of this legal framework and the fact that racism is incriminated according to the law adopted in 2021. So those who should work on the indictment and who should bring those who should bring before the court such cases, and not even the prosecutors do not know about the existence of this legal framework. These are some gaps we are all aware of, and we are trying to work on that. Personally, I don't think coercion is the right means to bring long-term changes. It can sanction on the short run, but it does not produce consequences on the long run. The fact that a person or an institution is sanctioned for their attitude or for infringing these provisions. For instance, in the anti-Gypsyism law in Romania, only one case was registered in 2022. And that case did not have any legal consequences. And I have the data from a presentation from a conference in which I recently participated. This data does not belong to me, but to the General Prosecutor's Office. So only one case brought to the attention of the institutions in 1 year. Of course, it wouldn't made us happier if we saw 200 cases. This would only show the complexity of the phenomenon, but it would not produce consequences or changes in the way in which the large audiences perceive the Roma people. So the reconciliation, this term we keep hearing about, is the means, in my opinion. Us as well, we are Roma people, and unfortunately we found out about our history the moment we got in touch with certain organizations, and we did not have the chance to learn about this in school. I had to read about the Roma Holocaust, about the Roma slavery in Romania. I found out about all these topics long after I graduated the high school. So the National Roma Agency, as a coordinating agency, is not the Ministry of Roma people. This agency does not have an allocated budget. in order to implement the measures we talked about. Its role is to monitor, to coordinate, and to assess. In the report, I read about the fact that a long period of time was needed for a strategic framework to be implemented. And indeed, it's been a long, lengthy, difficult process during which we negotiated, we harshly negotiated, and I can give you examples if you want me to. So the new elements are those related to the reconciliation with the historical past. These are elements I strongly cherish, and during the past years in Romania and also at the level of the EU institutions, we've heard that poverty is not something specific to the Roma people. We had more visible or less visible results, but what's very clear to us, those of us who represent the Roma minority in the parliament, and we are just we are quite ephemeris. We're just passing through. So how do we manage to bring change through the means at our disposal? So last year, for the very first time, on the 2nd of August, the National Roma Agency organized an event to commemorate the Holocaust. To which high officials from Romania participated. So I think these elements define the way in which we want to build the reconciliation with the historical past. We need the first liners, the highest officials to participate in such events and to pass through their messages. Why? Because we had the pandemic and now the war started. And given that even in the past the Roma topic was unpopular, now it's put even behind in the Romanian and European agendas. So priorities changed. And this shows that in the situations of crisis, populism and extremist messages are a matter of real concern.
Nordul Europei sau chiar centrale cu politicieni de marcă care își câștigă mandate de reprezentare fie în parlamentele naționale, fie europene, având ca teme centrale în campaniile lor și atacul la adresa minorității rome.
There are even actors that manage to create careers by having a discourse that is against Roma people. I hope that we manage to organize at the level of our institution another event this year, just as we did last year on this topic. And last year in December, we founded a working group in order to define the topic of a museum for the Roma culture by also aggregating sociologists and other experts. We also talked with the director of the Romanian Peasants Museum. We have submitted this project to the government of Romania. We are talking with the Ministry of Culture that would have to take necessary steps in order to found the Roma Museum and also the Roma Theater. These are elements that we are thinking about. We have the framework, strategic framework for the Roma people, but we also have another government decision, 509, namely, that government decision explained clearly that the Roma Theater must be founded, and our institution follows these ideas, this direction. Another element that I find very important is the need to have systemic instruments in order to obtain macro results. I think that the study of the history of Roma population in our country, so slavery, the Holocaust period, the forced assimilation period, and also the contribution of Roma people to the development of Romanian state are essential elements that might help change attitudes and perceptions, because mentalities themselves are more difficult to change. And also for the students in Romania, in order for them to have a different perspective other than the one they get from the media, they should also be targeted by certain projects. Because there is this perception of the Roma community being criminals. That's why we only have these perspectives. Of course, there are also success stories. People who have managed to overcome the expectations of others. People of success who can be models, role models, not only for the Roma community, but also for the Romanian society at large. On the 20th of February this year, the event organized by the Roma Agency and the cabinet of the Prime Minister mentioned all of these elements that we've discussed as well. And these elements are good, but not enough. We need more. We need experts from the ministries. We need people working on strategies and their implementation to give up what Iulian said earlier. There is an institutionalized racism, and we grew up in it. In Romania, and not only, Roma people are seen as people who don't want to send their children to school, people who don't want to work. So all of these unfortunate perspectives show that in Romania and in other countries they are perceived in a bad manner. And in order to change this, we need Roma children to be received in the educational system. And now at the agency, we are identifying experts with whom we could work in order to compile information that might serve as a manual, a handbook for our history that can be used in the education system. I think it can be done so that in Romanian schools, in the 6th, 7th grade, 8th grade, students can learn, all students can learn about Roma culture, about the traumas that the Roma population has gone through. And therefore, a better knowing the Roma community might change perceptions. This is the end of my intervention. Should you have any questions about the strategic plan or about the elements that I have mentioned, please go ahead. And I'd like to add one last thing. What is lacking is it some sort of mobilization of the Roma people, regardless of their institution or their organization, some sort of coalition against common ideas and common values in a more strong way. I think we can have a strong voice, not only for the elements discussed here. And I think that not only in Romania, we have this lack of politicians that can address the problems of the Roma communities. We have this populist and extremist danger. In other countries, we've seen nationalist movements gaining ground. And maybe sooner or later it might happen in Romania as well. And that is a danger. That people who get to power with democratic instruments might come up with ideas that have nothing to do with democracy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paraschiv, for your comprehensive contribution and raising so many important issues. I really hope that we will have the opportunity to come back to you during our discussion. Before I briefly introduce the next speaker, I have to inform you that Ms. Soraya Post can't make it, unfortunately, today. So we will have only 2 more speakers on this panel. The first one will be our next speaker, Mr. Giuliano Dumitru, who is representing Aresel, which is a part of our CHACHIPEN project consortium. And when we are talking about the fight against historical rooted anti-Gypsyism and which tools are available, I think it's really very important to listen also to Roma grassroots organizations and their work and experiences. So please, Mr. Dumitru, we are interested to listen to Aresel's experience and the work of Aresel. The floor is yours.
Hello, first of all. Thank you for inviting us. Congratulations for your initiative. Very interesting. And very useful and fruitful conversation. But I am a descendant of Holocaust victims. And I'm quite unhappy with the way in which Romanian state has treated these victims, because the compensations of the Romanian state for these people were somewhere around 170 lei, and many of them died. So we are talking about a clear racism. These Holocaust victims received little money a month for that. It's shameful. It's not a true compensation. we are still seeing that the Roma population still has no museum. In schools, the situation is difficult. On the 20th of February, we signaled the problems with which we are facing. We are activists, so we can afford being a little bit more direct. Following the discussions with Ms. Solomon, that we all know, we discussed about this strategy, which I think that you know very well. And I have here a report from 2005. So 18 years ago. In 18 years, not much has changed. We still get promises that we're going to include elements of the history of the Roma people, that we're going to do this, do that, but these are only promises. I had a look at this strategy from a budget perspective. Brothers and sisters, from our point of view, it's clear that a real change is not wanted. Because if you have budget zero for an activity, it's impossible. In order to only print a document, I need at least 1 leu to print it. So we are quite unhappy, and we all know this. First of all, we don't have Roma judges who can be a part of the system. We have lawyers. And lawyers tell their clients that they have to dress in a different way in order to be judged a different way. Or sometimes you get the advice, choose a lawyer to represent you that is a part of the majority population. So this is the reality. So, Mr. Paraschiv, I'm asking you, if in 18 years nothing has changed, how can you change anything now, given that the Commission has said that the strategy for Roma people is not sustainable? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dumitru. Let's first have Mr. Pedro Casermeiro giving a kind of perspective from Spain before we could end the discussion. Mr. Pedro Casermeiro is a social psychologist. He's a member of the association Rromane Siklovne and responsible for projects aiming at protecting and promoting Romani culture in Catalonia. He's also the director of the Virtual Museum of Romani People in Catalonia. He coordinates educational projects with young Romani students and is also involved in the recovering Romani language and teaches it in different neighborhoods of Barcelona. Pedro also acted as a CHACHIPEN researcher in Spain, and together with Annabel Carvalho, they conducted a study on historical rooted anti-Gypsyism in Spain from the Middle Ages until the democratic Spain, with a focus on Franco's regime. Please, Pedro, tell us about your experiences and also thinking probably a little bit about what are the experiences from Spain which could help or informed people, the colleagues in Romania. Pedro, please, the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning. Well, I'm going to make a brief introduction to the research carried out in Spain within the framework of the CHACHIPEN project, and our main conclusions and recommendations linked to transitional justice process. With our research, we have tried to describe how institutional anti-Gypsyism, state anti-Gypsyism, has been built and developed throughout through the story, since the arrival of Romani people in the Iberian Peninsula, and paying a special attention to the Franco's dictatorship. Okay? Between 1499 and 1783, more than 250 laws were directly exclusively against the Romani people, seeking to eliminate their culture, their way of life, their traditions, their trades, their language, even prohibiting the use of the word Gitano. Okay? In 1749, an attempt took place. Okay, the first genocide described in Europe in modern history. We find a clear linearity in the different political measures taken over the centuries in Spain with the measures currently taken. In the last pragmatic decree against Roma in 1783, the monarch literally says that he does not want to exterminate or annihilate the so-called gypsies, but to suppress their name and rectify their costumes. And I would like to emphasize this sentence, rectify their costumes, because this is the spirit of the first anti-gypsy law, and we think this is still the spirit of the main policies carried out during the democracy, including those ones framed in the national strategies. Another of the lines of continuity, in addition to rectifying our way to life, is to deny our identity. Throughout the anti-gypsy regulatory corpus in Spain, our cultural identity has never been officially recognized. In the beginning, we were represented as a danger to morality. Later on, we became criminal. And today, we are a marginal or a vulnerable group that still needs to be rectified. And policies has never framed Romani people as a cultural identity, as a national minority, but as a vulnerable group that should be integrated, a group that should modify their way to life. All we know of Romani history is written by the oppressive side. All the history we know is the history written by a state that has persecuted a people who know with no defense capacity other than to resist. No part of our history has been written by us. We have never been allowed to. So the narrative constructed about who are the Roma and what to do with them has always been built by the others. And this is one of the main issues to address through the transitional justice processes from our point of view. The main recommendation in our report is to collect the maximum number of testimonies of Roman victims of Franco's dictatorship. If we don't collect their voices, they will be forgotten, and we will not be able to write our history once again. So we urge to collect these testimonies. They are crucial to set up a truth commission. To understand how anti-Gypsyism is expressed today, it is necessary to know what the period just before was like. The Franco dictatorship generated a scenario of exclusion and segregation that is still in force today. The legal equality achieved by Roma people with democracy does not imply equality. As indicated by the different studies carried out at the state and at the European level, the socioeconomic situation of the Roma communities has gone worse in recent years, despite the strong economic investment made by the European Commission within the framework of Roma national strategies. So one important issue for us is to develop, in the frame of a true commission, we should analyze the background of the main policies carried out in the recent years, why they are not working, are they targeting Roma people exclusively as a vulnerable group? So a truth commission should allow to break down the linearity of policies developed targeting Roma in the last centuries, trying to re-educate them, or to rectify them, or to integrate them. A truth commission should serve to recognize the history and identity of Romani people, but mainly it should recognize and identify institutional anti-Gypsyism, to eliminate it, and to build new policies free of prejudices about who are the Roma and what are our problems. We know that, and what we do need this to happen. Beyond political commitment, we need a strong Roma society, a responsible commitment of Romani actors to undo all barriers that will arise in a process like this. Spain has never recognized Roma as a national minority, and this commission should be the first step to change the historical relation between the Roma and the state. And finally, but mainly, it should serve to generate political strategies to allow all Roma population to evolve in society in equality, without the weight of centuries of racism. In the next panel, Ismael Cortes will deep in the Spanish legislative initiatives regarding anti-Gypsyism, in which there is a working commission on Romani memory, which would be, with the Spanish vocabulary, a truth commission. And we should build a transitional justice process around it. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Pedro. And also thank you. I would like to thank very much also our other panelists. I hope we have some question now from the audience. So I would like first to give the opportunity to people to put questions to our three panelists. Are there any questions? Please don't be shy.
Julius Rostas,
Julius Rostas is my name. I have two questions for Mr. Paraschiv, the president of the National Roma Agency. One of them is related to the revival of the Commission for studying slavery in Roma slavery in Romania. From a legal point of view, this commission exists. It is subordinated to the National Roma Agency, and ideally it will be revived. Of course, this cannot happen over the night because we are also talking about financial resources. However, what do you think? What are the odds for this commission to be revived and to obtain resources in order to make it operational as part of the reconciliation process? My second question is, of course, the National Roma Agency, it's not the Roma ministry. And the position of this agency in the governmental structure is not, let's say, the happiest. But what could the Roma activists do? What could the organizations do in order to support the National Roma Agency in becoming more influential in the government, in the governmental structure?
Do we have any more questions at the moment? If not, then probably we should give Mr. Paraschiv directly the floor, and probably you could also refer already to the question raised by Mr. Dumitru at the end of his presentation. Please.
Bun. Este clar că reconcilierea cu trecutul istoric, așa cum am menționat, reprezintă...
It's clear that the reconciliation with the historical past is a priority. From the budget of the National Roma Agency last year, the study regarding the setup of the Museum of Roma Culture was financed. We had very important actors involved in this. The work spanned over the course of some months, and in my opinion, this is a very good material with overarching elements that also include the presentation of the notion of slavery in Romania. Mr. Furtuna was also a member of this commission. And the document I'm talking about has some hundreds of pages with very condensed messages. In the dialogue we had with the institutions, the question asked was, so how should we do it? How should the permanent exhibition look like? What are the elements that it should contain? Should we should we relate to the slavery or to the Holocaust? What are the historical events that should be treated? We decided that this piece of work can only be conducted by experts in this field, given their high level of expertise. It is also clear that we do have available information. Maybe they are not too comprehensive or do not reflect the past as we would want it to. But I'm trying to go even further and ask, but what do we do with what we already have available? Because if we only read it and the information circulates among us, it will not be helpful. I need this to be passed on to the larger audiences, not only to the Roma people, because reconciliation implies both ways desire. We should always see how the institutions are open towards such topics. I was telling you that we would like to work on a handbook with accessible content for a certain age range, as I'm very open to this topic. And we want these materials to be accessible and available for the larger audiences, not only for Roma pupils or Roma students. This should be included in the main school curriculum. I don't think we can become successful if we only use coercive elements. So if you are directly interested in this topic, I am available with all the details you might ask for. And of course, if you have suggestions on ideas we could put into practice, I am here for you. Secondly, the National Roma Agency's openness towards the civil society. Many organizations refused or declined to participate in the events we organized last year. But let's say they had objective reasons for which they could not attend those events. But what I'm trying to bring on the table of the Administrative Council is the representation level. We had representatives such as Dorin Troabă. Many of you only reacted only when you heard his name. And he is not my king. He is only the representative of his organization. I want this to be clear for all of you. So those who wanted to participate. They did it. We had a consultation process. My colleague from the Aresel platform brought into discussion the critical position we have in relation to what institutions do. Maybe I haven't been too clear or too adamant about this, but I'm going to repeat it. In Romania, we are negotiating with the ministries in order to obtain more allocations. For the very first time, the finance ministry rejected to allocate funding for certain activities. The Roma topic is like a hot charcoal. It's a very complex topic, and I'm very open to critics, which shows that the Romanian society is alive. We have a social life, but as long as criticism is constructive and as long as it provides alternative perspectives, it can work. Maybe we don't see what other people see, and dialogue is extremely important. So I would be happy to see how the dialogue is encouraged, not only during these meetings. I would also like to continue the dialogue at the end of the event. Moreover, the strategic framework was built in close relationship with the Roma civil society. It is true that after the legal steps were completed, we received certain requests only after that. But the strategic document was under public consultation. However, subsequently to this step, certain organizations sent us requests to include certain elements which were mandatory for them because they received funding for that purpose. However, they did not send these requests within the deadline. So let me restate that the negotiation with the institutions is not easy. At some point, ministers would change, and that would also trigger a change in the way in which the documents we submitted were regarded. It's not easy to make something work when we bump into the ignorance of so-called experts. What I'm trying to say is that the way in which the police is interacting with certain Roma communities, that is the only institution entitled to use force. And allow me to say that last year we started a project with the University of Pharmacy, and the students in the School of Medicine took part in this project. And 2 days ago, we signed a memorandum with the Police Academy in Bucharest, with whom we are going to start the same activities as we want to inform the future police officers. And this type of activity will be extended in the police schools. those that train the future police officers that are to interact with the Roma communities. So I think such steps are needed. After they receive information on the Roma minority, I really hope that maybe their attitude will not change entirely, but maybe they can ask themselves certain questions. This is an objective we want to achieve. It is also very clear that many other things could have been done. And in 2001, when the first strategic framework dedicated to Roma communities was made public, things happened, but the Roma criterion before 2007 was a precondition of for joining the EU. In other words, Romania was forced to come up with a more open approach when it came to the problems of the Roma communities. It is also true that the expectations were quite high, and I would like the relevant ministries to budget certain activities, as this can trigger changes in the society. But the reality shows that we failed to see how the authorities, and I'm not talking about the central authorities, I'm talking about the local authorities, who are not that open and interested in this topic. So the local authorities should prioritize and intervene directly in order to trigger changes. Their intervention should not stop at the outskirts, there where the Roma communities live. And allow me to say that these are the realities we are familiar with. And the government, through its national programs, is bound to respond. It is, and in order to answer to the representative of the Aresel platform, many things have just stopped at some point. Many things could have been done, but I don't think we should give up. I don't think we should give up on using the tools available for us. I think we can channel our energy in order to trigger real changes. Our efforts are shared. Of course, we can see at certain points things differently. This is what a democratic, healthy society should look like. However, there are steps that have been made.
Avem generații întregi care finalizează studii liceale, pe locuri speciale pentru romi sau.
These past years, we've had many generations interested in this topic. We must offer them perspectives, and we need to support them to make sure that they can carry out their activity. And I'm going to try to end my presentation here. Very often, it might seem that before the pandemic, and before the aggression of Russia against Ukraine, these discussions did not seem as important in Romania and in European countries. There is a real problem, but one that we've decided to hide under the rug a little bit. Is it a European problem or a national problem? We don't know. We don't have an answer to that question. But the EU must stay strong, must remain involved in the democratic realities, the practice and the way in which certain entities are gaining ground is really worrying for me. It is a danger, not only for the Roma community, but for European society as at large. If you have any other questions, please go ahead. I hope my answers really gave the pieces of information you were looking for. I would like to thank Iulius for his contribution. And your interventions and research even help us, allowing us to direct our actions.
Mr. Paraschiv, we slowly have to move on. Because, yeah, sorry. But we have one more question from Sergio Carrera, and I would like to take this as a short question. Also would like to ask for a short answer because we're a little bit over the time already. Sergio, please.
Thank you, Stephan. My question is for Pedro Casermeiro. Thank you, Pedro, for your presentation based on your excellent report, CHACHIPEN National Report on Spain, that you co-wrote with Annabel Carballo. And I wanted to ask you, Pedro, about the reasons that in the report in CHACHIPEN you highlight for residential segregation of Roma populations in Spain, and how this actually continues exacerbating social exclusion. And what are your views in this matter? If you could develop briefly on this residential segregation and how you guys see it needs to be tackled. And the second point relates to statistics. In your report, you call for obtaining and relying more on statistics on Roma population, and I wanted to link it up with Mr. Iulian Paraschiv point on what happens and how to avoid, if we go ahead with statistics on Roma, that these statistics end up in the wrong hands, meaning on extreme right political parties. In Spain, we have Vox, who are clearly openly racist. But also we have similar movements across European countries of political parties that their policy is a racist policy. Now, how to make sure that these statistics serve the purpose and do not end up in the wrong hands? Thank you.
Well, I will begin by the first question about the numbers, about the statistics. If we don't have clear statistics, real numbers, we cannot define which is the problem. We can be talking long about, yes, I think we have this problem, but we cannot identify really with concretion, and we cannot say to the state, this is the problem, because we have no numbers. And without numbers, we always find the same problem. There is no budget. I think there is a connection between not being able to define with numbers, with not having budget. I think there is a link there. And the problem with to identify yourself as Roma is a problem. Inside the Roma activism, the position is not to get that information. And inside the organizations don't want to give numbers, to say names and to say he's Roma, he's not Roma, because we fear about what happened in the history. all the laws we have in Spain obligating Roma to settle down, to work in different jobs, to live in different municipalities, all the Roma who follow those rules and who settle and who work in the jobs they have the permission to work and to live in the municipalities they were settled, those ones were the victims of a genocide. And the ones who didn't follow the rules could escape from the genocide. So Roma in Spain difficultly will give their names as Roma, because the history says that we cannot do that. And it's not only about having one political party in the extreme wing, right? It's about where is the war going on. We don't know if democracy will go on many years on. We really don't know. We saw what happened in Brazil, in United States. Who knows what will go on in Europe in 50 years? We really don't know. And the victims are always Roma. So here we have a problem. Here we have a real problem. And about segregation, the residential segregation was planified by Franco dictatorship. And 90% of Roma is living in those neighborhoods. And they cannot access to job, they cannot access to culture, they cannot access to equal education, they cannot access to social rights. In the same way, if you are living in the center of the city. So this neighborhood has a mark, an ethnical mark, which is Roma people. They are built for Roma people and they are settled there. We have a strong investment to change these neighborhoods, but never to undo these neighborhoods and to spread the Roma population in different neighborhoods in the city. No, the political line is to have those Roma there. And it happens during democracy. Maybe we invest more money modernizing these neighborhoods with no result, with no impacts, than spreading the people. And that's all.
Thank you very much, Pedro. Was not a very positive perspective or a positive statement. As we finish now our panel, but I think we have to be realistic also what Mr. Paraschiv said, having in mind the current war of Russia against Ukraine and which impact this has already now on the Roma in Ukraine. But when we think a bit in the future, what kind of impact this could have for the democratic state of the European countries in the future, and in particular for the Roma, it's not a very bright perspective. Anyhow, with this not very bright perspective, I would like to thank you very much for your contributions. We ran over the time, but it was an interesting topic with interesting contributions. Yeah, there's now a coffee break, I guess a more shortened one, and then comes the next panel, and Isabella Michalaki would share the next panel. I wish you all a productive continuation of this meeting. Thank you very much and have a nice break.